I'm Ashton Addison from the Crypto Coin Show, and today on Blockchain Interviews with Jana Bertram, Head of Strategy from RARI Foundation, talking about RARI Chain. Jana, welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time today.
Hi, Ashton. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise, excited to talk about RARI NFTs. I've seen RARI around for many years, and I know it's just continually evolving. And I need to catch up personally on what exactly is RARI Chain and what the foundation's doing. So I'd love to start off from a high level on, what's sort of your role at RARI Foundation? What's the foundation working on? And then what is the difference with RARI Chain?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm head of strategy, and that can mean a lot of different things. But when it comes down to the key things that I'm taking care of at the foundation is I represent the interests of the delegates and the token holders, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's RARI DAO. It's governed by a delegate body. So you either have your RARI token and you are active in our governance straight or directly as a token holder, or you are involved through having delegated your voting power to a delegate that represents your interests. And the DAO votes on what the role of the foundation should be, what are the key initiatives that we should be taking care of. The DAO also finances the foundation. So we at the foundation, we have ideas of how we want to be growing ecosystem and how we want to be shepherding the adoption of the decentralized NFT infrastructure that the DAO governs. But we always need to pitch those ideas to the DAO and see, if they're on board.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a mandate that is given by the DAO. So my role is to be, making sure that our governance functions properly. You might have encountered issues with DAOs that would have maybe capture of power, concentration of votes, general atrophy, low levels of participation. So the DAO is something that requires quite an active attention from the wider ecosystem, but from the foundation as well. So we run programs for delegation and so on. So there's just this piece that we just need to make sure that the governance is vibrant and that it functions. So that's one bucket of my work. And the other bucket is then the ecosystem growth piece, where we come up with initiatives such as launching RARI Chain, or we attract some ecosystem partners to be building with the tech, and then we come up with ways of activating those partnerships in benefit of the end user. So again, I, together with our team, come up with the ideas of what we can be doing. And then if it's within the mandate that we're given by the DAO, then we also go and execute. So we oversee the execution of all these key ideas. Now, the foundation also has this administrative role, right? It's a legal body that can enter in agreements. The DAO, it doesn't necessarily sign contracts, right? It doesn't necessarily have stable list of vendors. The foundation does. So that's kind of the relationship between the foundation and the DAO, and what my role is. The foundation is not just me. We have a team, right? So everything is a team effort. But it has been really great to be working with the DAO and really bring in some of these ideas to life. So that makes me touch on RARI Chain. So essentially, the DAO came to exist to govern the Rarible protocol. Think about Rarible protocol as the back end of Rarible Marketplace, which is an NFT marketplace that was launched fairly early on, in the NFT, mania, essentially. And there was always this appetite to have community really involved in the future of the marketplace. So what it came down to eventually was this protocol layer being a piece that got fully decentralized. And when I say fully decentralized, you have this managerial decentralization where the DAO is making decisions about the treasury and the proposals and whatnot. But there's also the technical decentralization where the smart contracts are actually governed by the DAO. So to be upgrading or changing the protocol, it needs to go through the DAO vote. We're now like working towards a future where all of this is actually multi-chain as well. So there's like a lot to unpack there. There's a lot that's like in the governance side, right? But like so think about the DAO governing this protocol, right? And why? It's so that there can be decentralized and free infrastructure that can serve as a launchpad for future projects.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack when you integrate a DAO, and I'd love to jump into that later. You know, the efficiencies and how it's actually going. You know, I feel like eventually every company is going to start integrating more decentralized governance. And a lot of companies, especially traditional companies, they're like, where do we start? You know, there's so many functions to running an organization. How do we decentralize all of them? And, you know, and what baby steps do we take to like start the progress? So it sounds like RARI DAO has a hold on a lot of functionality. They're starting to actually implement it successfully, hopefully. I would love to dive into the chain a little bit more. You touched on it in the second half there. I think some people have seen Rarible around as an NFT marketplace, and now with the chain, it sounds like that would be the best place to create NFTs or to trade them, not having to go on one of the more traditional blockchains that's probably costs more and is not as efficient. Maybe you can touch on the chain and sort of how I'm guessing, specifically focused on NFTs in all aspects.
Exactly. So with the idea of the DAO governing decentralized NFT infrastructure, right, that can be the launchpad for future projects and also like future use cases for NFTs. More than a year ago, we had this idea of like branching out from the Rarible protocol and offering another element of infrastructure. And in this instance, it's the chain, right? So it's a proprietary blockchain, but that is also governed by the DAO. It's an L3 that sits on top of Arbitrum 1. And with that, to your exact point, as an L3, the gas is really low, right? So if L2 provide cheap gas, L3s provide even cheaper gas. So it really allows for truly scalable applications and solutions. And apart from the cheap gas, and then like there's all these like tech aspects that are really cool, like because you're in Arbitrum orbit, you inherit like Ethereum scale security, and the block time is really quick. So there's like all these like technical components that like work really well despite this being an L3. I know that sometimes people are just like, oh my God, L3s are a thing. Yes, they are. But there's also this piece where when architecting this L3, we have embedded royalties enforcement mechanism on the node level. So essentially, the sequencer will only validate transactions that are respecting royalties. And if you are not paying royalty, your transaction will not pass through. And we did that because we have seen that, creators are really responsible for a lot of, cultural relevance of blockchain. And they are the ones who create a lot of appeal for mass adoption. And it was really unfair to see that, these early adopters of NFTs and, also the engine to like a wider adoption of blockchain, where after some time being disintermediated by their royalties getting slashed, right? Like, understand, it was like a bear market. You're trying to stay afloat as a business. You don't want users to feel like there are more barriers to trading. So where do you cut? Right. And like cutting from the creator side felt like a lot of business for. And that just didn't sit right with us. And then when we looked at like our community, and a lot of our community is also from the early users of Rarible, they've always been pro royalties and pro creator. And so was like Rarible Marketplace. They never slashed royalties. So there we had the idea of embedding royalties on the node level so that as a creator, if you embrace RARI Chain as your place to be dropping your NFTs, then it doesn't really matter that in the future a different player will come on the chain, will build an app. Like they will not have the possibility to circumvent royalties, right?
Mm-hmm. Wow. No, that's a really important factor. And I didn't hear about that. I think there's a lot of people that haven't gotten in it to NFTs, especially creators that probably should. And from the understanding is that, yeah, if you create a piece of original artwork, if it gets resold multiple times, that second time that it gets sold, the original creator should continue to be getting a cut because, people still like their artwork. And that's sort of the beauty of smart contracts and NFTs is to be able to keep rewarding the original creator. So what you're saying is the marketplace themselves or the people that are trading, we're actually able to just take that reward away from the creators, and what they thought they were going to get, all of a sudden they weren't getting it anymore. That I didn't hear about that, but that's a huge issue with people that created art thinking they were going to be getting royalties toward in the future.
Exactly. So as a creator, like you're also running a business, right? Like some people create for the impulse of creation, and that's totally fine. But if you rely on this as your source of income, then you do some sort of projection, and the royalties might be a piece that you have calculated that is a part of the equation. So a lot of artists, for example, launched their NFTs at rather lower price because they thought that, well, when there's a resale, I can like make some incremental, and then suddenly that incremental like was no longer an option, right? And they undid their own art in the beginning. So it did create like a different kind of issues, but like ultimately, like why do we want to make sure that there are royalties enforced? Is because we feel like creators are an essential part of Web3. They're an essential part of Web3 economy, and they need to have their guarantees because they need to have a place where they feel like, it's safe for them when it comes to their earnings. And it also like opens like this bigger question of like, as a creator, how do you make money in Web3, right? Because you have NFTs, you are selling them, either it's like your primary sale or it's a secondary sale and you're reaping royalties. But what other ways of monetizing your income, right, do you have in Web3? And that's where a lot of creators are actually like not fluent in the concepts of DeFi. And they're missing out on opportunities to be making yield, to be lending their NFTs, to be borrowing against them, to be, participating in all sorts of ways that you are able to generate yield. So now we're actually like cooking up a series of workshops. So depending on when we're live with this podcast, the workshops might just be happening or might have just happened. But really doing workshops for the creative community and for the creators to onboard them onto DeFi through RARI Chain, but also through like Arbitrum ecosystem at large, because a lot of the integrations are like ecosystem-wide integrations. Because we don't want to teach creators just to operate on RARI Chain, right? Like it's knowledge that's really beneficial. And we're also like running some nice fun contests to, drop your art, be exhibited and so on, and like get grants. So there's like an element of reward for the creator as well. But I think this is like onboarding so that they understand the wider, earning opportunities in Web3, I think is like a natural progression of like us trying to be here for sustainable creator economy.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Jana. A lot of artists, they just think I create art, I sell it, and people, admire it and own it. But how can you further monetize on that? And I think a lot of artists aren't thinking, well, I'm an artist, I'm not a finance major. But if you can lower the barriers to entry for decentralized finance integrated with NFTs to be able to do more different financial functions with that NFT, whether it's lending it or dividing it into a million pieces to be able to sell it off, or any other kind of financial functionality. I feel like if we can get that message across to artists, they'll be more inclined to want to tokenize their art because they understand that it's not just that royalty reward that they can get for resale. There's a multiple amount of other functionalities they can get from the financial aspect for their NFT.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's an untapped opportunity for a lot of creators. So we're trying to bridge that gap essentially and bring creators a little bit deeper into Web3.
Definitely. No, that's really exciting. I'd love to follow up on that. I'll definitely check out the workshops, whether they're live or finished. I'll put that in the show notes below because I think that's really interesting. I'm wondering on the NFT side, there's been obviously a huge wave of artists coming in or digital artists creating artwork and tokenizing it. But they say eventually NFTs, you'll be able to tokenize anything outside of artwork and sell it as an NFT. What's your take on sort of the major use cases for NFTs right now? Is it still the main thing is digital artists or artists tokenizing their artwork? And do you see that expanding into these other areas that people talk about of tokenizing the entire world, where we're at with that?
I think tokenizing the entire world might as well be the future. Yeah, I know. It's funny, right? But there's going to be a lot that will be powered by Web3 or NFTs, and it will be just on the back end of the experience. And on the front end, the users will not even have an idea, right? So whether it's in like identity, whether it's in real world assets, right? Whether it's in like provenance, there's a lot of use cases for NFTs as a technology, as the backbone for, that information essentially, right? That doesn't need to have like even a visual aspect to it. So it doesn't need to be what we now sometimes call NFTs digital collectibles, right? I think that's like a rebrand for like the art aspect of NFTs, but it's not a title or a name that would actually encompass the full potential of the technology, right? So, whether you're talking about this like financialization of NFTs that are more of this like art-based NFTs, but you can also talk about tokenization of real world assets, right? Like think about home ownership, like you have investments in homes as investment vehicle, right? All of that can be on chain, right? And it can be powered by fractionalizing NFTs. The same thing with like NFT lending borrowing, right? Like again, like that real world asset case, like is really opportune for, this kind of dynamic. I have two small kids and I'm constantly bringing them to vaccines, right? Like I just want their vaccination records to be NFTs, right? Like why do we need to like keep a paper trail and get like a confirmation by their doctor every single time they need to go to camp? So there's just a lot that can be brought on chain in terms of data, and use the NFT mechanism as a way, for these transactions and for this information to be immutable.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think a lot of people hear NFTs, they hear RWA, real world assets, but they might forget that those real world assets most likely are NFTs and they're tokenizing the real world asset into an NFT. And there's so many more use cases that are still being developed that eventually probably traditional investors will be investing in something, micro investing, not realizing they're actually purchasing an NFT.
Yeah. And the art market is here to stay. Like digital art is a very well-established form of art. And it's only natural that some digital art will also exist as NFTs. And some of it will be traded and some of it will be held. And that's okay, right? Not everything needs to be, flipped around. Some of it could be actually like NFTs that don't change many hands.
Definitely. And I know there's millions and millions of artists that have yet to actually start putting their art into NFTs, or they're doing digital art, but they just don't know the right path to follow to tokenize into an NFT. And they come and they're not familiar with blockchain because they're not a finance kind of person. And they're like, there's so many different chains, where do I start, or what's the best choice for my art to be on this chain or this marketplace? How do you compete with that? And are there incentives for creators to come and say and realize that RARI Chain is the best place for them?
Yeah, I think there's two things that you need to evaluate as a creator. One is liquidity, and the other one is community. Liquidity means that there's just sufficient amount of buyers or sufficient amount of money that will create the demand for your NFT. And the community aspect is very important because a lot of the times you have ecosystems and they put incentives behind certain campaigns and they attract users, they attract creators. But then either the incentives dry up or the focus shifts and the community is not cultivated. And with that, you might have had few successful drops on a certain chain, and then suddenly your drops don't work anymore. And it might not have been you, actually, right? It might be that the audience has moved on to the next hottest ecosystem. And with that, you're expected to move as well, right? So you have a choice to be constantly chasing, like, what is the happening ecosystem, right? But if you're cultivating your collector base and if you want to be somewhere that, you would call like a home, right? Because it's also like hard for the collector base to be like jumping from one chain to another. Then you want to make sure that you select a place that actually is value aligned and that will have your interest at their heart. And that's what we're trying to cultivate with RARI Chain. So we're not trying to seize all the creators of the ecosystem. We're not trying to be like, a major, massive ecosystem, right? That just like pops up with like billions in TVL. That's not the ambition, right? The ambition is to be good, solid home that is value driven for these creators, right? And next to that, also be able to power all these new use cases for NFTs, right? Because we're highly efficient and we're highly scalable. But really, like, that is, in my opinion, something where the chain is completely abstracted from the user experience.
Yeah, I think that's important for adoption beyond just tech enthusiasts of artists, that they care about the art, they want to get it into the hands of the right people, and they're not worried about which technology is underlying getting into those hands. So
yeah, exactly.
And with RARI Chain, you mentioned drops there. Is the marketplace partnering with any like major artists or collections, collaborations to help drive awareness and sort of drive awareness of the great artists that are already on the platform as well?
Yeah, so the marketplace has RARI Chain integrated. So if you look for RARI Chain NFTs, really it's probably one of the easiest place to go and browse like what's available on blockchain. As to visibility and artist drops, it is something that we did for launch. We had few artists that were exclusively dropping with us for a period of 2 weeks, and it was really good because we saw some drops going like truly viral and generating a massive amount of revenue in 24 hours for the artists. So that was really good. What we are doing now, like in conjunction with those workshops, is there is a contest where you drop your art on RARI Chain, and then through attending the workshop, you get a password essentially that makes you eligible to enroll in the contest. And with that, like those drops, right, you can contact Rarible to have your drop scheduled, or there are other ecosystem projects where you might be able to drop permissionlessly. Or what we call a self-serve drop, essentially, right? And with that, you can enroll into the contest. Now, the winners of the contest, they will be exhibited in a real-world exhibition in Bangkok during DEF CON. They will get a grant each as well. So there's like a monetary reward, and they will be like promoted across all the channels. So like we want to make sure that we're providing like paths for creators that are dropping with us to be visible and to get rewarded, right? So whether it's monetary or whether it's like a recognition of like artistic value of your submission, right? We just want to make sure that, we're out there to showcase essentially those who decide to partner with us.
Yeah, I love that the focus continues to go back to the creator and getting their visibility or making it easy for them to showcase their art, get their art on the chain, and then showcase it and and have that liquidity, as you mentioned. So I'm going to check it out once again as well. And now I want to move towards the future. We've talked about a lot of great stuff, and there's still so many artists that need to start tokenizing. And I'm sure there's more functionality, as you said, financial side of it, the workshops. What else can be done, or what's planned to be done in the growth of RARI Chain and just getting more mainstream adoption, hopefully expanding beyond Web3 altogether, bringing more users in. But is there anything in the roadmap of major milestones or minor milestones in what to expect, those who join now, what they may see in the future?
Yes, this end of the year is almost upon us. So we're really looking at early 2025 with the next big push. And the idea there is, to your point, exactly opening the scope of what creator is. And with that, bringing in people that might not even consider themselves necessarily as creators, but they are, and showing them the opportunity of using NFT as technology for, not only monetization, but also for cultivating their communities.
Amazing. And if there are new artists that want to check out the process in how to actually get NFTs created and shared out to others, or there's people that want to check out those NFTs and that artwork, what's the best place for them to start at?
So actually, Rarible as a marketplace has a decent level of resources for creators to walk them through how to create an NFT, how to set up trades and all of that. So I would say they're a really good resource. But you can always also check out rarichain.org, which is website for RARI Chain, and look at some of the past successful drops. Get in touch with us. There are a couple of forms you can fill in, or just email addresses to ping. You can also just DM us on Twitter at RARI Chain, or join our Discord, our community calls. There's like multiple ways of getting hold of whether it's key delegates or whether it's a foundation team. And then we can always, direct you to the right place to learn more, or, we have a conversation with you.
Sounds great, Jana. I will leave the link to the marketplace and the chain and the socials and everywhere else that people might be interested in checking out next in the show notes below. I really appreciate your insights into the current status of NFTs, artists creating artwork and being able to share it to the world and keeping the royalties, being able to understand how else they can monetize off of their artwork, and whether it's through selling it to a friend or monetizing it in some decentralized finance platform. The options are continuing to grow for that. And I'm glad that RARI Chain is playing a part in that. So thank you so much for your time. And I would love to follow up again in the future.
Thank you so much, Ashton, for having us and giving us a platform to share what we're building and what we're working on. Appreciate it.